Welcome to Seismic Radio, and welcome to our session here at Seismic Radio in Romans, and we are in chapter 2, and it's verses 25 to the end of the chapter, which is verse 28. I'm just going to read it to you. For circumcision is indeed profitable if you keep the law, but if you are a breaker of the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. Therefore, if an uncircumcised man keeps the righteous requirements of the law, will not his uncircumcision be counted as circumcision? And will not the physically uncircumcised, if he fulfills the law, judge you, who even with your written code and circumcision are a transgressor of the law? For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly. And circumcision is that of the heart in the spirit, not of the letter, not in the letter, whose praise is not from men, but from God. Okay, that's the scripture in Romans, and we've got a couple of problems here. The first one is, what is circumcision? In case you don't know. In Jewish tradition, circumcision was that a male child was circumcised. The foreskin was removed on the 8th day. And without going further into the whole medical implications, there are some advantages, there are some disadvantages. I know the Muslims, they tend to do it. They circumcise their children, not on the 8th day, but sometimes a lot later, and it's very painful for kids sometimes. The reason why did the Jews circumcise? What was the main reason for them? And one idea there are some medical implications where there are some advantages if children are circumcised, or males are circumcised. As far as hygiene is concerned and some other things, but it's not obviously a requirement for Christianity. So if you want to be circumcised because you become a Christian, it obviously doesn't really apply to us, and I'm very grateful for that as well. So circumcision used to be a sign. Every male was circumcised, so you belonged to a certain people group, and you weren't identifiable because you wouldn't sort of run around with that. But it was just a sign, a covenant. The child is circumcised. The child belongs to the nation of Israel, or to the Jews, and that's it. No, the big problem we had in the first century was that we had Jews and we had Greeks and Romans, or Hellenists, who came from a pagan background, and they both became Christians. And the Jews started telling them, "Oh, right, now that you're a Christian, you better think about getting circumcised," which, again, is not a very pleasant thing, especially in those day and age when hygiene, for operating or doing operations like that was not maybe understood as it is today, and it was fairly painful as well. So Paul deals with this. What is the circumcision thing all about? Do I need to do it? Do I not need to do it if I'm a Christian? There's also an implication for us today, and it's pretty much about the whole Old Testament law, and the whole chapter, the first chapter and the second chapter, deals with all these things to some extent. And the point he's making here is, even though you've got a covenant with God, and the covenant consists of the law, if you break the law, then the circumcision doesn't really help you. It's become uncircumcision. You're just somebody who's uncircumcised. Somebody who's not part of the covenant once you've broken the covenant. Therefore, if an uncircumcised man keeps the righteous requirement of the law, will not his uncircumcision be counted as a circumcision? Again, the same thing. Would God condemn a man who is not circumcised, but he's keeping all of the law? And the point Paul says, no, it would just be like he was circumcised because he's keeping the whole law. And will not the physically uncircumcised, if you fulfill the law, judge you, who even with your written code and circumcision are a transgressor of the law? Again, Paul makes this the point as well. You may be circumcised, and somebody may not be circumcised, but if he fulfills the law and you don't, who's got the upper hand here? It's probably the person who has fulfilled the law, but he hasn't got the sign of the covenant, of the law, but nevertheless he has done it. Whereas you may have the sign of the covenant, but you haven't kept the covenant. So it's a problem. And then Paul makes a big point, and he says, look, it's not about being outwardly, carrying all the signs and all the paraphernalia of, being a Jew, in the flesh, for example, but it's something inwardly. And then Paul brings a new point here, and it's a circumcision of the heart. Yeah. It's really interesting. So it's not the circumcision of the flesh. It's not something which happens in the flesh, but it's something which happens inside your heart. In the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not from men, but from God. Okay. So the new covenant, and that's what Paul is leading up to, is a covenant of the heart. And we already have seen in Romans, what we've looked in chapter 1 and chapter 2, that God has placed his law into our hearts as we come to Christ. And we have become members of this covenant through our hearts being sealed. Later in the Bible, in 2 Corinthians, we find that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, is given to us as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. It's been given to us into our hearts. So we have got a sign, we've got a marker, so that to illustrate that we belong to God, but it's not in our flesh, but it is in our hearts. Yeah. So that's how our ownership is described. Obviously, you can't see it, I can't see it, but God can see it, and that really what counts. God knows whether I'm of His, you are of His, or I'm not, or you are not. Yeah? And that's really the key. It is something which is done in our hearts. So, again, let me try and put this into a modern context. Yeah, we're not really having the issue anymore of you come to Christ and the first big question is whether you are going to get circumcised or not. That was first century stuff, and when the first century was over, it wasn't really of great importance. But we've got something similar as well. We've got belonging to a group of people, maybe belonging to a denomination or belonging to a church. And some people feel that because they belong to a church, and maybe they've got a membership or whatever, that pretty much gives them a ticket to heaven. And that pretty much, the title Christian, because you've been labeled as a Christian, is a guarantee that you are going into heaven. And the answer is it's not. Yeah? A title is meaningless. A stamp on your personality or in your passport, maybe it says, depends which country you come from, it says you're a Christian. I was looking at my old certificates, and when I got my baccalaureate, so this is, if you want to go to university in Germany, you have to do, it used to be called the Abitur, the baccalaureate today, or in English. In my days, they gave the option to put the denomination on this, and it was either Catholic or Protestant, so they put this on your certificate. And in my case, because I wasn't neither, I was raised a Catholic. I left the church when I was 16, when I became a Christian, and I went to a Bible-believing church, and they put on a free church denomination, which can be a problem, because in Germany a lot of people will think that I belong to a cult or something like that, which is clearly not the case, but I put it on there. So I've got a label on my certificate which says I'm a free church guy. Yeah. I belong to an evangelical denomination. That's pretty much what it's saying. And not one of the state churches in Germany, Protestant or Lutheran or Catholic, but some other church. And some people will see it as a problem. It's a stamp, but this stamp is not going to do anything for me. I'm not going to go to heaven because that stamp is on my certificate. I just seen it. It really struck me. I thought, what have I done there? But it's no difference. Yeah, it's not going to get me to heaven. It's not going to change anything. It's not a seal. It's not like a circumcision. But it's something in the heart. In the same way, if you go to a church, or maybe you're born into a Bible-believing church, it doesn't make you a Christian. The stamp doesn't give you anything. You've got an advantage. You've been entrusted with the secrets of God, same as the Jews have in their day and age. You will have heard about Christ, but what you do with this is still down to your heart. So your quote-unquote circumcision, which means your membership of a certain church, a certain organization, you having grown up within a certain organization, is meaningless. Doesn't mean anything. But what is, and we come right to the bottom of this text, right to the end of this text. What it says is, it's whatever is happening inside of you, whatever is happening inside of your heart and the spirit, not in the letter. What is in the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter? Is your praise from men or is it from God? That's the thing. Do men think you are a good Christian, or does God think that you are okay? I'm not going to dwell too long on this. The whole chapter has just been dealing with this, and we are just sort of digging into the same stuff again and again, but looking at this chapter. But again, I just want to challenge you, and I want to ask you, where do you stand with God? Are you just a quote-unquote circumcised person? So that means on the outside, everything is okay. You go to a church, you call yourself Christian, you believe in Jesus, but your life doesn't possibly really show it, or maybe you haven't really got the strength to show it in your life, and so you need to cover up things because you've still got hatred in your heart, you've still got jealousy, you're still controlled by greed, you're controlled by things which are not good. You know it deep down, but maybe nobody else sees it and knows it, because on the outside you're okay. You are the example of being a Christian, but deep down it's not right. Something is still wrong, and you don't know. You can't place your fingers on it. And I just want to encourage you, and again, I make this point. I made this before, and I want to make it again. And that is to open your heart and to really go to God with whoever you are and whatever is inside of you. To invite Him into your life for real. Not just to do the religious things, to do the outward things, but to let God into your life, to let God into your heart. The religious things may be good and may be fine, and it's good to get engaged and get involved in church life and stuff like that, but that's not all. If that is all, you will find that one day you wake up and you've missed your life because you're not doing the things you should have done. You're not living by the Spirit of God, but you're living by the flesh. You're trying to please God in your flesh. You're trying to please God in your old nature, in that what you have got to offer, not in that what God has placed inside of you. And that is really the difference. We cannot please God in the way we are. We need to open up our hearts. We need to open up our lives. We need to ask God to pour out His Spirit into our lives, and then we will be able to please God through the Spirit of God, not through ourselves, not through our things. Okay, I'm just going to give one example, and I'm going to leave it on this. One thing we have to understand, that everything we are is dust. Yeah. It sounds very cruel and it sounds very harsh, but I'd once seen a crematorium, and I was just interested to see how this whole process works of getting rid of a human body after it has died, and all you get is it's pretty much a shopping bag full of ashes. There's not much left of a human. It's about maybe a couple of kilos of ashes, and that's it. And the guy was telling me pretty much, the weight people were born with, that's what they say is what's left over when they die. And the rest is just burned away, and all that's left is dust. God has cursed the dust when Adam fell, and we are made of dust, and there's something which is not right. If we try to please God in our flesh, in our dust, it just doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. We need to stay away from dust and from dusty works, and we need to, rely on the Spirit of God to come into our lives, to revive our spirit, and to serve God in our spirit, revived, redeemed, brought back to life through the Spirit of God, through the Holy Spirit. And only then can we do works pleasing to God. In Philippians we get something is that God says that we should work in the works God has prepared in advance for us. And it's a big question, what does it mean? God has prepared works in advance for us to work the will of God. It makes it really, really easy. All we need to do is just, focus in our lives on Jesus Christ, on what He has done for us. Walk through our day every day with this attitude, and then just do what is right and what is good and what God has placed in front of us, and then move on. And that's really what this is saying about. I'm going to leave it at this. I want to encourage you to not trust in external covenants you have made, not trust in your denomination or belonging, in the fact that you belong to a denomination. I'm not saying your denomination is wrong. It might be the best that there is. But don't trust in that. That's not really the be-all and end-all. Don't trust in what you do and who you are. But I want to encourage you to really open yourself up in your heart to the Spirit of God. Being redeemed through Jesus Christ, what he has done on the cross. And having this covering of the blood he shed on the cross over your life, and having free access to God through that. And that's really what I want to encourage you from, and then to work in the Spirit, not in the letter. Yeah. So that's not by following and observing laws. And we talked about the New Testament law before as well, not through just knocking yourself together a New Testament law, do this, do that, do the other, make this, make that, have a certain routine, certain rituals or whatever. That's not the answer. It's not bad in themselves very often to do these things, but they are not the answer. They are not what really counts. What really counts is your relationship with God and the Spirit of God. And, the circumcision of the heart, to look at the last verse in this chapter, that is what matters, the circumcision of your heart, not the outward things you do and you are and what you present or what you represent. It's very easy to fall in this trap, and I've fallen in this trap many times. But it's very hard to walk in this, what shall I say, to walk in a circumcision mentality. It's very hard to walk in that and to live in a circumcision mentality, In other words, we need to get away from a circumcision mentality of, doing things and trusting into what denomination, what organization, what context we belong to. And we need to get back to a real relationship with God. Forget about organization, institutions. Forget about ritualism. Forget about religious exercises. But really seek the person of Jesus Christ. Seek a real relationship with the living God. That is all the difference. It makes all the difference. Okay, I'm going to leave it at this point. You're listening to Seismic Radio. Our web address is www.seismicradio.org, or email us info@seismicradio.org. Thank you for listening. God bless and bye-bye.